Vareth Prime was a world of metal cities, glowing towers, and silent laws. Its sky shimmered with silver dust, and its people, the Varethi, lived by strict order. They believed emotion was weakness and mercy was dangerous. Among them lived Lyra Vethan, a young scientist with bright violet eyes and endless curiosity. She worked in the southern research zone, studying mineral storms that crossed the planet every few years. Lyra loved her work, but she often wondered about the stars, about the strange world called Earth that her people always spoke of with contempt. Humans are reckless, her mentor once told her. They destroy what they touch. We stay strong by keeping them out. Lyra had never seen a human, but she didn't fully believe the old stories. She wanted to understand why the humans were hated so much. One night, during a heavy meteor storm, the sky turned into fire. Alarms echoed through her station. Her colleagues ran for shelter, but Lyra saw something through her scanner. A ship. It wasn't Varethi design. It was small, burning, falling fast. Unknown vessel descending, non-Varethi origin, the system warned. Lyra froze. A human ship, perhaps? No one should be here. The planetary defense grid would destroy it soon. But the ship was already breaking apart. It hit the desert far beyond the safety zones, vanishing in a cloud of dust and light. Lyra stood at the window, her heart beating fast. Command will send soldiers, her colleague said. They'll erase everything. She nodded, pretending to agree, but her mind was already made up. Something deep inside her whispered, "Go." That night, when the storm faded, she took her hovercraft and flew into the desert. The sand glowed faintly under the twin moons. Smoke rose ahead like a dark finger pointing to the stars. She found the crash site half buried in glassed sand. Metal twisted, broken wires sparked, and among them lay a body, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a strange burned suit. It was a human. He was still breathing. Lyra's heart raced. Every law told her to leave him there. But as she knelt beside him and saw the burns on his skin, the torn fabric, and the faint rise of his chest, she couldn't turn away. "He'll die," she whispered. "And for what? Because of fear?" She pulled him out of the wreck, struggling against his weight. The sandstorm picked up again, cutting her face with sharp wind. She loaded him into her craft and flew back to her station, praying no one saw. Lyra hid the man in her private lab under the main research dome. She told her team she needed to study storm residue samples and locked herself inside. For hours she worked, using medical drones, sealing wounds, repairing his breathing mask. His name tag was half melted, but one word was still clear: Rourke. When he finally opened his eyes, Lyra froze. His gaze was weak but alert. "Where am I?" he asked in a rough voice. "You're safe," she said quietly. "You were in a crash." He blinked, trying to understand. "You're not human." "No," she said softly. "You're on Vareth Prime." Fear crossed his face. "Your people hate mine." Lyra hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe not all of us." Over the next few days, Lyra learned his full name: Captain Elias Rourke, an exploration pilot from Earth. His mission had been peaceful. His ship had malfunctioned during the storm. He was never supposed to enter Vareth space. She should have reported him immediately. Instead, she brought him food, checked his wounds, and asked endless questions. "What is Earth like?" she asked one evening. "Blue," he said with a tired smile. "Lakes, skies, oceans, all blue. We argue a lot, fight sometimes, but we also build, dream, and try again." Lyra listened with wonder. Her people built cities of steel and rules. Humans built dreams out of chaos. In return, Elias asked about her world. She told him about Vareth's cities, its pride, and its fear of emotion. He laughed softly. "Sounds lonely," he said. Lyra looked down. Maybe it is. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as a Varethi scientist, but as someone simply curious about the universe. But secrets on Vareth never stayed buried. 2 weeks later, the regional inspector arrived unannounced. He was tall, cold, and precise. Commander Thalor Vex, a man who enforced the council's laws without hesitation. "Dr. Vethan," he said, his silver eyes narrowing. "There have been irregular energy readings from your lab. Explain." Lyra's throat went dry. "A failed experiment, Commander." "Open the lab," he ordered. She hesitated. The door slid open. The lab was dark and empty. Elias had hidden behind a supply wall, silent as stone. Thalor scanned the room, frowning. "Strange," he said. "I sense something alive here. Something not Varethi." Lyra forced a calm smile. Perhaps a small animal from the storm. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned to leave. Be careful, Doctor. Secrets are a disease that destroy worlds. When he left, Elias stepped out, pale and shaking. He knows, he whispered. Yes, Lyra said quietly. We must move you soon. That night, Lyra tried to contact a transport pilot she trusted. She planned to send Elias to the outer moons where he could find a way back to Earth. But before she could finish the transmission, alarms rang through the station. The door burst open. Thyler stood there with guards behind him. I knew it, he said coldly. You brought a human here. Two soldiers pulled Elias from the shadows, forcing him to his knees. Lyra stepped in front of him. Don't hurt him, she shouted. Thyler's face was unreadable. You have broken the first law of contact. The council will decide your fate and his. Lyra's voice trembled. He was dying. I only wanted to save a life. Thaler's gaze hardened. A life that does not belong here. Within hours, word spread across Vareth Prime. A Varethi scientist saved a human. A forbidden act. The High Council declared emergency rule. They claimed Earth had sent spies. Fleet orders were given. Communication lines between the two worlds were cut. Lyra and Elias were taken to the capital under heavy guard. As their transport flew above the glowing city, Elias looked out through the narrow window. They think Earth will attack, he said. They always needed an excuse, Lyra whispered. Now they have one. He turned to her, his voice steady. You shouldn't have done it. You could have lived safely. I couldn't let you die, she said quietly. Not when I could help. He stared at her, searching for words. You're risking your life for a man your world calls an enemy. Lyra looked away. Maybe it's time my world learns what an enemy really is. When they reached the capital, they were separated. Elias was thrown into a dark cell deep under the council's tower. Lyra was taken to stand before the High Council itself. 5 tall Varethi in shining robes, their faces cold as marble. Dr. Vethan, the head counselor said, You have committed treason. You aided an enemy species. Speak. Lyra raised her chin. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. I saved a life. That is not treason, it is compassion. Compassion, the counselor said sharply, is the first step toward chaos. You brought danger to our world. The human must be executed. You will be stripped of rank and sentenced to exile. Lyra's heart pounded. Please, he came by accident. He means no harm. Enough. The guards took her away as she cried out. From his cell below, Elias heard her voice echo through the stone walls. He slammed his fists against the barrier, powerless. That night, he found an old communication node embedded in the wall, one the guards had forgotten to disable. He worked for hours, connecting wires, using parts from his broken wristband until finally the signal reached across the stars. A faint blue light blinked. Earth Command, this is Captain Elias Rourke, he whispered. If you can hear me, she saved my life. Now we have to save hers. Static filled the cell. Then a voice replied, faint but clear. Message received, Captain. We're coming. Elias closed his eyes, exhausted. He didn't know if war could be stopped now. But one thing was certain. The universe would remember the day a human was saved and how that single act of mercy changed everything. The night sky over Vareth Prime burned with streaks of fire. The first human fleet had entered the system. They came not to conquer but to demand answers. Yet to the Varethi Council it was the proof they needed. Proof that humans were a danger to peace. Inside a dark prison cell, Captain Elias Rourke listened to the distant thunder of explosions. His hands were bound, his uniform torn, but his eyes were sharp. He knew Earth's fleet wouldn't hold back forever. They'll fight for me, he murmured, but they don't know what started this. He remembered Lyra's voice, her courage when she had stood between him and the guards. She hadn't cared about the law, only about life. Now she was somewhere above, facing judgment from her own kind. Elias looked up at the ceiling and whispered, Hold on, Lyra, I'll find you. In the Grand Council chamber, Lyra Vethan stood in chains before the High Council. Her violet eyes glowed with quiet strength, even as the counselors shouted at her. Because of you, one shouted. Our cities prepare for war. Because of you, another added. The humans dare enter our skies. Lyra's voice rose above theirs. Because of me, one man lived. That is not war, that is hope. The head counselor slammed his staff on the floor. Enough, the human will be executed at dawn. You will be sent into exile on the barren moon. Lyra felt her knees weaken. You can't. He did nothing wrong. The law is clear, the head counselor said coldly. Mercy to the enemy is betrayal to our people. As the guards led her away, she whispered to herself, then maybe your people have forgotten what it means to live. At the same hour, in the prison below, Elias had found help in an unlikely place. A young Varethi guard named Rin, barely out of training, had been watching him for days. You don't seem like the monster they describe, Rin said quietly through the cell door. Because I'm not, Elias replied. The woman who saved me, Lyra, she only showed kindness. And now she'll die for it. Rin hesitated. They say the council will execute her at sunrise. Elias gripped the bars. Then help me stop it. Rin's silver eyes flickered with fear. If they find out, then tell them you were following orders, Elias interrupted. Please, you know this is wrong. For a long moment, the young guard said nothing. Then he deactivated the lock. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Go, Rin said, looking away. The council's tower is above the central square. You'll never make it without being seen. Elias smiled faintly. I'll take my chances. Outside the capital city was chaos. Air sirens wailed as Varethi warships rose into the clouds to meet the human fleet. The sky glowed red and blue as plasma fire streaked between the stars. Elias moved through the alleys, stealing a dark cloak from a market stall. He kept his head low, listening to the voices around him. Everyone was talking about the war, about the human invader and the traitor scientist. He finally reached the base of the council tower, a tall spire of black metal rising into the stormy sky. Soldiers guarded every entrance. He could never go through the front. He looked up and saw an old maintenance tunnel leading into the side of the tower. Using his training, he climbed the narrow frame, forcing himself through sharp metal beams until he reached the vent system. From inside the vents, he could hear muffled voices. Then, her voice. Lyra! Please, she was saying to someone. You can still stop this war. The reply was cold. War has already begun, Doctor. And your human friend will pay the price first. Elias clenched his fists. He followed the sound until he found the holding chamber where she stood in chains, guarded by 2 soldiers. He kicked open the vent, dropped down, and fired a small pulse from the stolen guard blaster. Both soldiers fell unconscious instantly. Lyra gasped. Elias! He grinned weakly. Told you I'd find you. She shook her head. You shouldn't be here. They'll kill you. Maybe, he said, breaking her chains. But I couldn't let you die alone. The 2 ran through the corridor, alarms echoing behind them. Lyra guided him through a service path she remembered from her days as a student in the tower. Down this way, she whispered. It leads to the outer hangars. They reached a massive window overlooking the capital. Outside, the human and Varethi fleets faced each other in a deadly standstill. Missiles were armed, ships on both sides ready to fire. Lyra stared in horror. If they shoot now, thousands will die. Elias looked at her, an idea forming in his mind. We have to make them see the truth. He spotted a communication console nearby, the kind that could broadcast to the whole city. Can you link this to the planetary feed? He asked. She hesitated. Yes, but the council will trace us in seconds. Then we'll only need one, he said. One message. They worked fast. Lyra connected the wires while Elias set up the camera feed. The broadcast light turned green. Across Vareth Prime, every public screen, every device, suddenly flickered to life. The image showed a human and a Varethi standing side by side. Elias began to speak, his voice steady. This is Captain Elias Rourke of Earth. I was not sent here to spy or to fight. I came by accident, and one of your own saved me when she had every reason not to. Her name is Lyra Vethan. She chose compassion over fear, and for that she was condemned. He looked into the camera. If saving a life is a crime, then maybe your laws are wrong. Humanity does not want war, but we will not let mercy be punished. I owe my life to her, and I'll stand beside her until the end. Then Lyra stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were full of light. My people, she said, we have lived too long behind fear. We call ourselves wise, yet we destroy anyone who shows kindness. This human did not bring war. We did, because we were afraid to see that others can care too. The broadcast reached every home, every station, every ship. For a long moment, silence filled the air. Then the murmurs began. Voices of doubt, of questions, of awakening. On the human flagship, Admiral Carson watched the broadcast and lowered his hand from the firing control. "Hold your fire," he ordered. "Let's see where this goes." On Vareth Prime, Commander Thaler Vex saw the message too. His face hardened, but not with anger. With shame. Minutes later, soldiers stormed the chamber where Elias and Lyra stood. They were surrounded, weapons drawn. "End the transmission," shouted a guard. Lyra held Elias's hand tightly. "At least they heard us," she whispered. But before the soldiers could fire, Thalor himself entered the room. His eyes met Lyra's. For the first time, there was no hate, only conflict. "Release them," he ordered quietly. The soldiers froze. "But sir," "Do as I said." When they obeyed, Thaler stepped closer. "You have caused great trouble, Dr. Vethan. Yet, perhaps you have also opened our eyes." He turned to Elias. "Tell your people to stand down. The council will speak of peace." Elias nodded slowly. "You're doing the right thing," Thalor sighed. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it is finally time we stop being afraid of what we don't understand." Within hours, the war fleets retreated. The human ships left orbit and the skies of Vareth turned calm again. The council issued a new decree. Contact with humans was no longer forbidden. It was the beginning of dialogue, not conflict. Lyra and Elias stood together on a high balcony, watching the sunrise paint the city in gold. "It's strange," Lyra said softly. "A few days ago I thought my world would destroy itself because of me." Elias smiled. "Maybe it changed because of you." She turned to him. "And what will you do now?" He looked toward the distant blue light of Earth. "Go home. Tell them the truth about Vareth, that it's not a world of enemies, but one that can still learn." Lyra nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then I'll stay and make sure they never forget what we learned together." He extended his hand. "Then this isn't goodbye. It's a beginning." She took his hand gently. "A beginning," she repeated. As his shuttle rose into the sky hours later, Elias looked down at Vareth Prime, no longer a world of fear, but one of hope. He thought of Lyra standing on that balcony, her eyes lifted toward the stars. For centuries, their two species had been divided by distance, fear, and pride. But one act of mercy had changed the path of both worlds, and somewhere among the stars a message echoed in every heart that heard it. "You saved a human? Then maybe it's time we remember what saving means."